So we've got a bunch of very distinguished panelists here, practicing architects, very successful practicing architects, and Mr. Sriram from Simpolo. What we'll do is the pattern is going to be that, I'm just going to, you already know who it is, so that's Biju Kuriakose at the far end, Bijoy, Ramachandran, Vivek, Bhole, Sriram, and I am Sriram as well. That's easy. So, what we'll do is Bijoy and Vivek have a small presentation each. So we'll step down, we'll see the presentations, then we'll come back here and begin our discussions. Yeah. So Vivek will go first. Yeah.
That is okay. So good evening. Just to set up a tone, now the topic is really very controversy. I'll try not to do that because I'm doing a lot of government projects. But today, when I'm giving you presentation, I'm trying to give you the idea how I diverted myself or shifted my focus from private practice to government practice, government projects. And to achieve that, there was a lot of transition. So we all know we have got this kind of clients, very organized. Our offices are like this, but then when it comes to government offices, the biggest issue is paperwork and handling, those approvals and different tenders and all those complex processes. It is part and parcel of architecture profession when it comes to government projects. So first, we need to understand whether our office is capable enough to handle faceless clients. When I say faceless clients, that means in private practice, always the client comes to your office and he gets the work done. In government projects, you will not be asked to do certain things. After some time, they'll just issue your notice. You are not done it. So you'll have to work on your own. So you need to motivate yourself. You need to create those cross checklists, and you'll have to keep on performing whether somebody is supervising you or not. Now, where actually we fail when it comes to the practice, architectural practice, first is winning the project. In private practice, we know how to get the project. Mouth-to-mouth publicity works very well. And then always there are those limited competitions. We participate and we get the projects. But when it comes to government projects, there is a different system altogether. The tendering, bidding, or even the architectural competition process, they are very complex. Scope of work in normal design architects practice is just a design and supervision, which is not exactly day-to-day supervision, but periodic supervision. But when it comes to government projects, the scope of work is totally different. It is always comprehensive. They want one window system. They don't really believe in specialization. So you have to create specialization in your own firm. Then approvals. We design architects. In Mumbai, this is a practice where design architects are different, licensing architects are different. I worked in Chennai as well as a design architect. So when you work as a design architect, you don't really worry about these approvals particularly. But when you go for government projects, they will ask you all the government approvals, right from central government departments to the local departments. Tendering is a complex process again, depending upon the type of the tender, the selection of the contracting process, contractor process, that becomes so irritating for people like us. We are creative people. But when it comes to preparation of tenders, BOQ specifications, we are not equipped enough. And the last but not the least, execution. So they expect you to supervise day to day. So PMC is part and parcel of the job. So we people are not equipped sometimes, and that is why we lose the opportunity. That is what I feel. Now, I don't really believe in showing my projects all the time. But here, it is required. See, I used to do these kind of projects till 10 years back. And then I decided to shift on to government projects. All these are like mega scale projects. That one hold the record for 18 months as tallest residential high rise in the country. Then these are like 1.8 million square feet of a layout. That is 150 acres of a layout. So all these kind of projects we are doing all across Mumbai as well as other cities. Commercial buildings. But these are all commercial architecture. So we did a lot of these malls, but your client is private client, and to satisfy them, it's really very easy. We did this project in Kumbhalgarh. In fact, Naveen did the landscape for this. Then something like this, where your client is now improved. He is not just a normal developer, he is semi-corporate. He has got something else to do these kind of projects. Then comes institutional architecture. So this is little away from, this is one step ahead. You are moving towards government projects now because you need something extra. So once we did this, we decided to go into government architecture. And then we got the first project like this. We got 12 railway stations in Mumbai. And this was a World Bank funded project where they wanted to avoid this trespassing. They want to add those FOBs and escalators. And we got this project. Now, understanding this is very important, that we got selected through QCBS tendering process. So QCBS, if you understand what is QCBS, quality come cost based selection. So we got that. And qualification criteria is you need previous experience. So we didn't have previous experience. So you need collaboration for this. And scope of work, again, comprehensive. So everything is included, right from structure, services, lighting, everything. Approvals not needed because MRVC was themselves the agency. And then tendering, item rate tendering. Now see, you will have to keep a check. Can you do this? If you can't do this, then just design will not win you the government project. That is for sure. Then Skywalks, again the project was by MMRDA through empanelment. So we got empaneled first. So number of architects get empaneled through empanelment. Then they select the architects through limited competition or maybe on QCBS system. Scope of work, again comprehensive. Item rate tender, but the execution was included in the scope. So you need to have PMC. Now you can depend upon outside agency or you can have it in-house. Now these kind of projects are coming a lot, government quarters. So this was for police housing. We are doing multiple projects for police housing. You get these projects through limited competition in empaneled architects. So empanelments are important. Now you need to be really always alert on these empanelment advertisements. Qualification criteria, again, previous experience. Now we show private sector experience to get these government projects. Many a times when they don't really want to give it to architects who are working in private sector, they'll put that criteria. They'll say, you must have done government project. So you'll have to leave that project. But once you have generated that kind of experience, you'll get those kind of projects regularly. Scope is comprehensive, approvals, all included, tendering, lump sum tendering for contractor, execution PMC. Now your firm needs to have all these capabilities, or you need to hire people who have those capabilities, and the coordination is in your scope. And you are responsible for everybody's mistake as well. So this is a different kind of project. We got it through a competition, a design competition, which was almost like a international level competition, where more than 30 firms participated. One of the biggest projects in the country, almost like 30 million square feet, 3 crore square feet. And the previous experience in private helped me to get qualified for this particular project. Scope, again, comprehensive, all the services are included. So this is the project. Then we got this kind of project, 6,400 acres in Bhilwara, through QCBS tendering process, through collaboration, because I was not qualified, so I had to collaborate with somebody. Tendering, EPC contractor came on board, a big one. where we had to design this mini secretariat of 140 acres of total footprint. Yes, 2 slides more. And then this is through design competition for LIC. Main subject is always the qualification criteria. We got this project again with collaboration and QC base and design competition. Right now under finishing stage. That's it. Thank you.
So good afternoon. Thanks, IDAC. Thanks, Karishma, for inviting me. If we can just put on the slides, we can be real quick. Yeah. Okay. Great. So much of the seminal work we look at, particularly to do with mass housing, comes from government-sponsored housing schemes built in the 70s. The setting up of the Housing and Urban Development Corporation, HUDCO, in 1970, and the nationalizing agenda of Indira Gandhi's socialist government, elected in a landslide in 1971, provided the patronage to a number of architects to work on projects that demanded both the creative expression of local conditions, program and priorities, as Charles Correa called it, and the clever manipulation of the modernist idiom to house the rapidly expanding urban population. The setting up of the Cooperative Milk Producers Union, a national network of dairy cooperatives called Operation Flood, required industrial buildings to house these large-scale production facilities. Achyut Kanvinde's project in Dudhsagar expressed in heroic fashion Nehru's temples of industry. The expressive ventilation shafts alluding both to Louis Kahn Richards Medical Laboratory in Philadelphia and a seemingly postmodern abstraction of the horns of the cows within. An early project by Kuldeep Singh for the Delhi Development Authority in Malviya Nagar in 1971 was the first cellular mid-density low-rise urban cluster housing scheme in India and inspired many similar mass housing projects by Raj Rival, that's Doshi, Raj Rival, Doshi and Korea. So there's Korea in Borivali, that's Doshi in Gujarat for the fertilizer, and this is the Asian Games Village, all these housing projects that all of us have seen. Many of these predicated on an understanding of climate, but also of community life and the accommodation of a growing family. HUDCO, which initially had its own architects working on projects, sought to engage with external consultants through design competitions and the publication of their famous handbooks on house types, created the platform for many architects to pursue prevailing international ideas on housing, like sites and services schemes, prefab construction, etc., but also provided the impetus for these architects to think about social import of their work and the particular challenges of working in diverse socio-economic contexts in the country. This kind of widespread socialist program is all but absent today and has been for decades. Increasingly, the government has abdicated its social imperatives, depending instead on the private sector to fill the housing gap through tax cuts and loan schemes. Increasingly, the world over, private enterprise has replaced public agencies in providing amenities and services to urban populations. And in India, large-scale public works are primarily focused on infrastructure and, unfortunately, vanity projects. And we will talk later, I'm sure, with Sriram about how these projects are awarded and why so many of us architects seem to have no way to access this wonderful patronage. In the light of this shift, I would like to talk about a small public institution we completed recently in Bangalore. The Bangalore International Center is an important project not so much for its architecture, but for the way it was conceptualized as an institution and the mechanics of its funding. The BIC is a club. Private individuals, mostly civil servants and the intelligentsia of Bangalore, longing for the refined intellectual environment of Joseph Allen Stein's India International Center, approached the Karnataka government for a 2-acre civic amenity site near a lake. All they got was a half-acre along a drain. The BIC was imagined as a place for informed discussion, public discourse, and cultural engagement, and at the core of its mandate was the idea that these events hosted by the BIC would be free for all and not just for its members. Membership was seen more as a token contribution to allow the center to pursue its egalitarian and democratic mission. An open competition was announced for 50,000 square foot building, mostly with places for events, And around 1,000 people contributed money for the building, from small donations of 20,000 rupees to large endowments in crores. Can this kind of crowdfunding and self-definition be a way forward? A few new design practices like sensing local. Hold on one second. Like sensing local, matter. That's sensing local that does a lot of public participatory sort of work. This is Matter, of course, all of you know Matter, Ruturaj and Mansi, who've initiated this kind of patronage which probably didn't exist before, and Compartment S4 working in really unique ways in which to make projects happen, are creating new ways to engage with the city, giving voice to community through innovative public participatory processes, and finding patronage by mobilizing private enterprise. Aniket Bhagwat, an architect based in Ahmedabad, has, along with other local practitioners, redeveloped 10 municipal gardens in the city by inspiring Torrent, the large private power producer, to support the initiative and offer to maintain these gardens in perpetuity. The program is called Pratiti. Rather than wait for the government's invitation, maybe we must articulate what is to be done and how. As Korea famously said, and I'll end with that, the architect must have the courage to face very disturbing issues. For what is your moral right to decide for the thousands, for the 100,000, for 2 million people? But then, what is the moral advantage of not acting, in merely watching passively the slow degradation of life around you? Thank you.
So let's get started. I think we have set the tone, right, for the discussion today. I had started off with some questions, but I've just got some new questions, some new discussions, and I'm sure we'll need to have a lot of discussion on this. So I think Vivek has really ramped up the way we look at architectural practice, and especially he mentioned, he showed the kind of work he was doing, and he said, now for the last 10, 15 years, we've stopped doing this kind of work and we've decided to do government projects. And then you could see the scale with which he's working. And the fact is that today we are probably the third largest construction market in the world. India is the third largest construction market. And there is a meter which says, various developed countries, which says how many, one architect per, like the United States, it's one architect per 1,300 citizens. Italy, it's one architect for 450 citizens. China is one architect for 40,000 citizens. India is one architect for 16,000 citizens, which is still a pretty huge disparity. And according to one of the COA notes, we only have a fifth of the number of architects we require to handle the architectural projects in India. 20% only. But on the other side, if you look at it, we have about 100,000, a lakh of architects, practicing registered architects. And less than 5% of them are handling government projects on a regular basis. There is another smaller 5% which handles a few government-funded architecture projects. And we're talking about a few, it's almost like $1 trillion business. So clearly there is a gap between private practice and government-funded architecture. And then we had the presentation of Bijoy's. So there was this great anticipation of this wonderful Indian Nehruvian dream and the Indian architectural paradigm. We had wonderful masters who came forward, Habib Khan and all our Koreas, Doshis, Kanvindes, Raj Rewals, and I'm not even naming all of them. There's just so many, and some wonderful works that were done. When I say wonderful, I'm saying value for design, value for the people, value for the spaces, and the culture that it's been a part of, material handling, and it was just something we could be very, very proud of. And somewhere down the line, I would say 60s, 70s, 80s, we just increased the number of architects in the country because we needed them, and we still need them. But a kind of a widening gap began to emerge. Suddenly the government became a very distant commodity. Private practices went into their own little cocoons, doing their own private work with various people, and various divides started to appear, and all of us are sitting in our own silos. So really this discussion today, I mean, this has been a discussion going on for a while, but I believe that it is very important for the body of architects, and especially the younger architects coming out, who really say that, look, we don't have work. We are not paid enough. We don't get enough salaries. There is no work. There's no future in architecture. And here the world and the statistics are showing we have probably the best potential for architecture. So where is this gap? So that's the discussion today. So I'll just begin with just a few questions, and then we could just throw it open for everybody. I'll start with Bijoy. So, why is it that the vast majority of the registered architects in the country do not work on government-led projects? In your opinion, because I'm sure you have participated in tenders. That's another terrible word which we really need to talk about at some stage. But why is it that, I mean, you may just choose to answer in a sentence, or you could just speak about it.
Well, for most part, we just don't qualify. For instance, we do institutional work normally, and for the institutional competitions that are announced, I'm talking about government institutional competitions, they require certain qualifications, so they're not open competitions, and so a firm like ours just simply does not have the portfolio and nor the turnover to qualify for that kind of a project. And I'm not sure what other way there is to get into this other than being friendly with people to get work through the government processes. Maybe Vivek has a lesson for us so that we can get involved. But yeah, the competition, we just can't make it.
So essentially, the procedure of shortlisting architects through a tendering process perhaps is outdated, or maybe it's just too rigid, too hard to really get in, and probably even objectionable in some points. So, Vivek, what do you say about it? What do you think about the procedure of shortlisting architects today?
So, see, your first question and second question are related. Now, when you say qualification, your client would always require somebody who is experienced enough, somebody who has got holding capacity. In government projects, a lot of resources are required, and if you don't really get paid on time, but you will get your payment for sure. So you need to be financially capable also. Now they want you to be capable, experienced, free enough to do their work, and then they want all single window system. Now if you create that kind of capability over a period, it will not happen immediately. So when I decided to start working for government project, I started thinking in 2008, got my first project in 2016. So it took me 8 years to get my first good project. Till then, I was getting all those small projects which were not worth mentioning. So you'll have to build it, your qualifications step by step, carefully, and then you will get the projects.
Okay, so that is, we're talking about large projects. So is there a possibility that these government projects can be done in these multiple grades? Like, let us say there are 10 grades, grade 1 to 10, and 10 is the largest size,
so
and 1 is the
smallest. There are those kind of grades. In fact, let me clarify first. Now we are bidding in many of these government projects where we are the sole bidder. So we don't qualify. You need at least 3 bidders. So we request people, please participate in the tender. So there are no enough participants even. So it's not that there is a rat race going on. And few small projects, even we are not interested in. So there is enough scope. The problem is our architectural practices, we have not developed them enough or matured them enough to take care of their needs. We'll have to play by their rules. That is one thing is sure. Now you can blame it, you can say it needs to be modified, it needs to get updated, everything is acceptable. But you'll have to play by their rules today.
Super. Thanks. Thanks. So then Biju has worked overseas. He's worked in the US. So in other countries in the West, in the US, how do they manage to have a high quality of their government-assisted public architecture? Is it because their processes are better, more transparent and streamlined? Or is it just a lack of deliberate intent in India here? Is there a deliberate lack of intent saying that we don't want to be so transparent? We wanted to make it hard.
Yeah, so I mean, if you actually look at many of the processes here, if you just purely look at it at them as processes itself, they are probably quite fair. You know, if you actually study them, you know, I mean, part of the problem is that we don't have, I mean, unlike what Bijoy was talking about, there was a patronage with certain kind of a vision, and that vision, you know, is not just about the project, but architecture, the image it creates, the kind of spaces, community living, etc., etc. Part of the problem today, I feel, is that patronage, there are two kinds of patronage. There are projects which comes with vision, and there are projects which doesn't come with a vision. And most often you will see that the projects which doesn't have a vision go through the L1 process, which is normally the lowest bidder gets the project and it carries through. And the projects which has a vision, say for example, Central Vista, which Madhav can expand on it more, goes through a tendering process or a competition process. Right? Either a competition or a QCBS process where you go through the technical qualifications and weigh it equally with the bidder, etc. So if you look at it purely at the merit of it, maybe it is fair, you know. I mean, the process are not problem. I think all of these lies at the end of the day lies with accountability. I mean, at many levels with the policy makers, whether the money they use is public money and who are you answerable to at many levels. And this is what I feel the huge difference between what happens in the West, where I've practiced, and what happens here, where every money that is spent has a huge amount of accountability to the general public. Right? And so the process that leads into the selection itself has to be quite transparent. Right? And once that accountability is set, and once it has to be transparent, then a lot of things automatically become fair, you know, and it's important to understand it. And I think, you know, I hear a lot of discussion about young practices, getting a chance, etc., etc. But it is also public money, so I think the processes can only be fair to some extent, in the sense that it can't be just about design. Right? I mean, there has to be a certain level at which many things have to be looked at different levels. Qualifications, design is one part of it, but it also has to be built, etc., etc. It has to be durable, etc., etc. So I think once you take care of that accountability, and as a you know, as a community, larger community, I think we are quite liberal with the idea of accountability. And we don't ask ourselves questions. If some projects happens in our neighborhood, I don't think we go and ask the, you know, corporation or whoever it is to explain to us, or any accountability from us as citizens, not as architects, as citizens.
But anywhere else in the world, do people go and ask? Or are,
no, it has to go through a certain process. There is a complete, clear public process. So when I do a large project in New York, for example, I have to take that to the community board and get it approved through the community.
So where does it begin? Does the community have to stand up and say, look, we want to have participation?
No,
or
it's
does
a legal
it begin
process.
from the...
It's a legal process. The project can't go through unless the community board voted through it. And in that process, the community negotiate.
So, Biju, I'm just saying again, in India, now in Chennai, now suppose we have to have a project in the same manner as you're saying, because it's all fair, it's transparent and everything. What is it that we are lacking? We have the people who are completely, I mean, the intent, everybody needs this, we are critical of everything that we get and have, and we know what we want, we seem to know what we want and so on. And the government is there at that distance which wins elections because we vote them into power, right? Because we expect that we're going to be getting things. Now, you spoke about a community participation. So that means there is something that's happening in between the community as individuals, as a collection of individuals, and the government which has been elected by these individuals. So there seems to be something that is coming in between, which the government takes seriously and says, look, you need to approve this project. It is your project. And the people are easily able to access these people and say, look, these are our problems and what can be done about it, right? So what is it? See, today's discussion we're talking about to see, are there solutions? Are there something that we can look forward to? Is there some kind of an initiative that can happen that reduces this gap? We're just talking about this three-letter word, this gap.
Yeah, so I think one of the solutions could be, and this is from my limited experience or our practice limited experience trying to get some of these projects, is I feel we have to look to negotiate at a local level in the sense that, we are too obsessed with these larger ideas, and wanting to have that change happen at a larger scale. I think the real change happens at the local level. And I'll give you an example, and I think, you can see Kavita doing wonderful work, and we just saw the presentation, trying to negotiate through many of these things. There was a project which was announced a couple of years ago by the previous government where similar kind of RFPs came out, and we knew we could qualify for it, but the prerequisites were very tough. In the sense that it almost never allowed any of the Chennai architects to participate in those projects, while most of us, including you, were doing pro bono work for the same projects for the city. So when it came to pro bono, you were qualified. When it needs to get paid, you are not qualified, right? So we actually went back to the corporation and heavily negotiated this. And in the pre-bid meeting, we constantly brought it up. And then eventually, because they all knew that we are already doing work, and they actually brought down those prerequisites to allow many of the Chennai architects to participate in those processes. And in the end, some of us put together a collaborative team. We actually got one of those projects. The rest went to different parts of the country, firms across. And at that point, we realized, it's a tedious process. One needs to have tremendous amount of patience to go through it. But the change only happens through negotiation, and the power still, I believe, lies at the local level and not at the larger discussions.
I think that's good. In fact, I like the way Vivek said, we worked with clients and then we started working with faceless clients. That is like, it's a very telling statement actually to tell you what's really happening. So, suddenly it becomes, it's a mirage. You don't know who you're working for and what is it, and it's just getting so ambiguous. Whereas if you see Bijoy's presentation, the quality of work and the kind of participation and everything that we are seeing earlier was just amazing that we somehow lost the thread. Now I'll just ask Sriram of Simpolo. So he keeps telling me, look, I'm like a fish out of water here because I'm not an architect. But
even it is the toughest task also you have given.
No, but my question to you is this. Now, as a vendor, I'm still calling you a vendor because we are all vendors in the eyes of the government, right? We are all vendors.
Correct.
So, as a vendor with Simpolo, you're going. Now, surely you're doing a lot of work for the government and you're doing a lot of work for private clients who have architects. Both of them have got architects. What is your experience in doing projects there and here? You may speak your mind within the domain of our congregation.
First of all, thanks for asking a simple question, easiest question, because I was wondering how to mingle with this kind of questions because you are talking absolutely technical part. Being a vendor, I may not be able to answer anything or cope up with your languages, in fact. But as far as vendor experience is concerned, getting a government project, going through the government project, little difficult, in fact. rather saying a little difficult, yes, it is a toughest job. You may not know what is exactly what you want for. Because today something may happen, tomorrow it may happen something. But when we go with the private practice as architect, what they need, it will be intimated to you very clearly. And when they need, it will be intimated to you clearly. But government project, everything is on cloud. In fact, half government body, like private architect involved in the government project, makes simple. I mean, private architect made our job very simple. I need so and so, so and so. I need so and so, so and so prices. But government putting us into the cloud always. So, I mean, handling government project, literally you need to have patience, smile face, and tireless effort. And not to praise private architect, yes, there are architects from government body, but there are very few architects are in government. In fact, rather to say. But getting into them little difficult. You do not know when rain will come, but one day will come. Thank you.
Gosh. I don't know what the fathers of the country would feel when they listen to this conversation. But we'll just stop our discussion here and we just throw it open for an interaction. Shall we start with Madhav or what? Come, Madhav.
You guys hear me? Okay. Now, since Biju baited me with that snide Central Vista remark, I thought I'll plunge right in. I think there is a via media here. There is a middle way. I completely agree with what both Vivek and Biju said about to snap out, for architects to snap out of that imagination that design-led projects have necessarily got to prioritize the purity of the design process selection as a thing. Because clearly for government, frugality, spend, qualifications, timeliness, these are all concerns, because if they don't comply to that, the comptroller and auditor general will get after the babu in charge, or the tendering, the bureaucrat who's conducting the tender. And therefore, this QCBS innovation that has happened is something I actually agree with. What I don't agree with, and this is perhaps something I think even Vivek might agree, is that in a QCBS system, quality cost-based system of tender, which is there in the general finance rules, there is a split between what is called a technical bid and a financial bid. So your quotation, financial quote, fees, is separated from the design, right? But what is not something I agree with is that in the technical bid, you are supposed to submit your experience and turnover, whereas correctly it should be in the financial part. The reason is, every tender is evaluated by a tender evaluation committee. Usually it is led by bureaucrats of that department issuing the tender, right? They are well within the rights to evaluate for frugality within the financial thing. What ends up happening is, because the quality cost-based tender is opened by one committee, which looks at both the technical bid, which is the design quality, and the finance or the cost at the same time, or sequentially, one after the other, but it's the same committee. One always wonders whether the evaluation committee are architects qualified to evaluate financial bids, and are finance bureaucrats qualified to evaluate the design quality. So I actually have a very simple solution, which I would encourage all of us who are IIA members to reach out to our chapter heads to talk about this to government, is why I don't see why the experience and turnover parts of the QCBS tender cannot be shifted from the bucket of the technical bid into the bucket of the financial bid. You still evaluate it. The QCBS allows you to give various weightages to various things. But in general, it does not require folks like Bijoy to feel disappointed that, oh, we'll never qualify. Because at least you have usually the technical bid or the quality part of the tender is what gets the higher weightage. That I have seen repeatedly. Never once have I seen the financial bid being weighted at 60% and the design being weighted at 40. It's usually the other way around, and usually it's in fact 80-20. So the finance takes 20% weightage. So I feel that that is a correct, legal, auditable way of arriving at better quality, more younger firms without necessarily having to tie up or do such things. I think if we can have that, that's my input.
So, so you're saying that the system, the QCBS system there is wisdom in that system. How about scale? Now, you take a firm like A plus V, who, I know we also run a small organization collective called Chennai Architecture Foundation, where, it promotes a lot of young architects who are doing work here. And they keep talking about the constant struggle. It's not that we don't struggle, everybody struggles here, but the constant struggle about not being able to get enough projects, and you're just living on crumbs and kind of a thing. And on the other hand, we see there are so many projects that are there. So why can't there be a system, a mechanism where even if it's a young firm, because the country is giving you a degree and a council says you are ready to practice architecture. So if you are given that qualification, then why do you say that you're not qualified to do a project for the government? Hang on. And so clearly there are questions. This is a rhetoric. I'm just saying that, So there is something that needs to be bridged, and you need to make it an even playing field for
so absolutely, this is exactly the point I'm making. I think you will find that most architects object to this idea of turnover and experience. But as Vivek said, it is well and truly part of the government's mandate to assure themselves that the person they hire is capable and has executed projects of the same kind. Now, if you notice in the experience column for these tenders, they have alternatives. They don't say you have to have this one experience. They'll say this much, or 3 buildings of this kind, or 5 buildings of that kind, and so on and so forth.
Or collaborations.
Or collaborations also, JVs and so on and so forth. That actually, even in an pure architectural competition, if a firm is the top 3 and they don't seem capable or experienced, they are asked to collaborate with someone more senior and experienced. I don't think that is the challenge. I think it's a very simple bureaucratic switch that needs to be flipped, and we'll all be much happier. Because in my experience of working with government, I've tried another model, which is to work when the government has signed an MOU with a funding agency or a foundation, like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and so on. We worked in those conditions. It's a pleasure. I mean, there's no problem. No one is feeling that they've been undercut or any such bad blood. But there is something to say that is not a competitive. Then it's up to the foundation to hire the consultant as per their preference. So if I were to think about democratic processes from a government perspective, then I don't think that's a particularly democratic process. So I feel the QCBS is the appropriate general vehicle, but we need to, as architects, apply ourselves to what exactly irks us about that system and try and get that addressed. And I don't think you will find that the bureaucracy will push back to that extent. They simply say that we don't understand design competitions. It seems too subjective. And therefore, we can't go down that route. Otherwise, the CAG will have us by the neck, So, that's my intervention.
Sriram, just a quick comment about that. There is another model as well, which is, like these Korean competitions, which Madhu recently won, or there was a competition in Helsinki just a few months ago. They're open in the first round, so it's a 2-stage competition. The first round is open to anybody. So you could be a student at Yale or like Maya Lin or anyone, but it's like one person firm applying, sending it in. But the requirement is that if you do get selected for the second round, you have to, or Utsan, right? Yeah, you have to then figure out a way to collaborate with someone locally who has the required experience. So what that does, it serves 2 things. It gives the young practice the possibility of working on a very large project, given that it is an association. But the next time there's a competition, lo and behold, this small firm now has a very large project under its belt and will qualify. So that could be a qualifier, that there's a second round, you pick the person you want to work with, a larger practice, you learn how that works, and then it sort of propels.
So even the QCBS has this. So the technical tender is opened first, evaluated, marks are given, and it is only after that the finance marks are assigned to decide what the win. It's the same firm, right? Yeah. No, I get it. Yeah, you are allowed to this thing. But my point is from a government perspective, I want full transparency. So if you're going into a JV, you have to say so in advance. I mean, that's the way this is the feedback I've got from bureaucrats, that they find the design competition thing too subjective, too open to manipulation, too, you can cartelize very much. I'm not to say QCBS you can't cartelize, but it seems more apparent that you can cartelize, at least to them.
Right. So I'm going to call a stop there and call for some more questions, please. Anyone? Yamuna.
I had a question for Vivek. He said from 2008 to 2016 it took you after you decided that you're going to change tracks. I want to know a little bit more detail, like what, because you said you were preparing methodically to change track. What was it that you did in order to do that? Like what did you build up? Yeah.
See, when you want to qualify, now nobody was actually asking that question, but the reality is even 50% of the projects, once we did the RFP, we decided not to participate, even if we are qualified. Because you can immediately come to know that this RFP is not meant for you. It is meant for somebody else who is already pre-decided. It's a very controversial statement, I know, but then we decided not to participate in that. That is first. So when we started, working on this government projects, so we came to know we are not qualifying into this, we are not qualifying. So what are those factors which are actually affecting us? So either we need collaboration or we need some projects which are actually where the private qualification, your experience in private project is allowed. So we initially targeted those kind of projects. So we cannot just jump into the project, like one which I showed you, BDD, redevelopment of BDD, that is the in central Mumbai, 17,000 crore project. So you don't get those kind of project day first. So you have to build that kind of qualification. It took years. So when they put the qualification was at least 5,000 houses of rehabilitation should be completed. So only 13 firms are there in the world. So it was a global tender. So in these situations, if you win, you have got fair chance to get the project. So you have to reach to that level, step by step.
Yeah, no, I just want to generally comment on the previous thing about the process itself. I mean, I'm not sure we can bring about this change any sooner. I mean, of course, at one level, we need to continue this process, like Madhav said, strengthening what we feel is the right thing. But I think as a community, as a professional community, there are many things we can do. And I think this is another thing that happens in the West. I know that, one of the partners of the firm that I was working on, when he became the president of AIA in New York, one thing that he brought about is that every large firm, when they get a large project, at least once a year or once every 2 years, you have to engage a young practice as part of this thing, and give them a small piece of it, right? And I think these are the things as the professional bodies we can initiate. See, we also don't have this point system. Like we, as an architects, we don't need to educate ourselves. I can graduate today and 20 years later, I can do the same things and not update myself at all, right? While if you look at in the West, you have to have collected certain number of points every year, which makes sure that there is a continuous education, license, these things, etc., etc. And all of this is missing in our practice. And I think, and the contribution of those things are humongous, especially to young practitioners and how you grow them up. And once you start to kind of nurture these kind of a system, and which we can do as a professional body, then you start to see that change.
Hardly anything you can do. I am working with them. I specifically said you'll have to play by their rules. And they consider architects as contractors. See, and they will keep on considering us as contractors. Let's face the fact.
Yes.
Not easy.
Mitro, that's all the time we have. Sorry, ma'am. One more question. You have a comment.
I actually wanted to ask Kavita, but okay, Kavita, please.
Now I know when they say architects want more time.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is a space in which I've been trying to do some work for the last 15 years, I think from 2007. And of course, all the people in Chennai probably are aware of the small steps that we've taken. But for the interest of those who are not familiar with the little steps we've taken, I can say, and it's been a very long journey, but I can say that we've come a long way from 2007 to where we are now, where Biju is able to participate and actually get 20 kilometers of public space project. So it has really been a journey of first willing to engage with the system to even create the education that is necessary. So us sitting in this room and having this conversation is one thing, but being willing to go out there and talk to the powers that be to explain to them is something completely different. So that's definitely step one for any change. More importantly, in my efforts to make any change, I've realized that unless the institutional framework itself is changed, it means educating the people who are taking the decisions, and you have to do that in a very careful manner, because in 3 works, the commissioner will change, the secretary will change, and a lot of top bureaucrats who are in that power, who have the power to make the policy change, they change very quickly. So you have to catch the right person at the beginning of his career, find that opportunity when he is in that department, he or she is in that department, and institutionalize that change. And that is possible.
Be the change that you want to see. Thank you. Got it. Sorry, that's all the time we have. We really need to wrap this up. Put your hands together for the illustrious panel here.